Hello and welcome back to Passing the Torch, an online Bible study with your host and teacher, Bob Clark. Yeah, I'm him. Today is Lesson 15C of Study 1 of a set of 8 studies that we're calling a Mosaic of Bible Prophecy. And Study 1, we're near the end of that right now. This is an introduction to and summary of Bible prophecy. So we're going through summaries of Bible prophecy right now. And today is the second part. It's lesson 15C. 15A, we had to do some background, laying some background for this. But 15B and C is actually going through this untraditional speculation of a pre-tribulation, pre-millennial rapture of the church view of end-time Bible prophecy, what we call eschatology. All right? So I'm not going to belabor the intro here too much because I've had to take this 1 hour lesson and break it into 2 pieces. And so I want these 2 to be able to put back to back. So I don't want to reteach all of this from last time, but I did want to remind you of what we talked about. And we talked about the rapture of the church, and this is where this viewpoint differs from the traditional view of the rapture, because the traditional view is the rapture occurs and then the next day, 3 days, a week, 3 weeks, 3 months, but not very long, then that's the start of the 7-year tribulation. But in this speculation, we have the rapture of the church, and then there is some time length between there and the start of the rapture, the 7-year, that last 7-year period. So how long is that? We speculated that it might be 40 years between the rapture and the return of Jesus to the earth at the end of the 7-year tribulation. So that would put 33 years between the rapture and the start of the 7-year tribulation. We also talked about the rise of the Antichrist. So now instead of the Antichrist, coming to show up, on the first day of the 7-year tribulation, he can now show up right after the rapture, which is, some number of years before that 7-year tribulation. Again, this is based on our assumptions for this speculation. But the Antichrist shows up followed or along with the false prophet. And we went through explaining last time speculating last time, how the Antichrist, we think, looks like he is a Gentile. The false prophet looks like he may be Jewish. And we speculated that even though the false prophet is Jewish, maybe he is the first Jewish pope. So, not going to reteach it again, but I needed to remind you of where we were last time. So, let's keep going from there to the real lesson 15C. So, we know from Daniel chapter 27, we've already covered this. Then he, that is the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week or 1 7-year period. It doesn't say make a treaty, it says confirm a covenant. So where does that treaty come from? Well, some people say that treaty, in the traditional approach, it is assumed that the Antichrist confirms the Abrahamic covenant with the Jewish people, allowing them to build the temple. But that is an assumption. So in this alien Islamic view of the rapture of the church, the rapture occurs. The next day or soon thereafter, a new leader rises up or starts his meteoric rise by proclaiming things like, the aliens abducted the evil, deceived Christians who were keeping the rest of us from evolving into what the aliens created for us. Those Christian warmongers were going to get us into another war, another crusade that would wipe out all life on earth. The aliens had to get rid of them. And there can be other things that he says, okay? It doesn't have to be that, but While I'm at it here, I'm going to do an aside. So I mentioned that word crusade. I know that you have the Billy Graham crusades. There's other crusades. I wish I have utmost respect for Billy Graham. Okay, he's passed away a few years now, but my point is not to disrespect anybody. My point is I really wish we'd get away from the word crusade, because the Jewish people, the Muslim people, they still have memory of the Crusades. People outside of the United States have long, long memories. They remember for many, many generations, and they remembered the Crusades where many Jewish people and Muslim people were killed by so-called Christians. All right, now, back on topic. So the idea is the Antichrist comes out and he starts saying all these kind of things that he gives people an excuse. Within a short time, if not at the beginning, this new leader reveals himself as, hey, I'm the 12th Imam. I am the Mahdi you have been looking for. He then proceeds to make, not confirm yet, but make a covenant with whom? With Israel? How about with many aliens? Promising that humans will cease all fighting to keep people from annihilating themselves. The human race from annihilating themselves. So it's really making a covenant between the many aliens and the many people that are left on earth. That's the covenant. Now, do I know that? That is speculation. But let's keep going. Instead of the many in this speculation being the Jewish people, it's the aliens, or the aliens plus humans. Of course, the aliens aren't real. They are the demonic beings that we've been talking about. But it convinces, or the Antichrist uses that phenomenon to convince the people of earth, who are left on earth. Considering the relationship between the Antichrist and Satan, he may very well be physically consulting with chief fallen angels, if not Satan himself. The story may be that he had secret meetings with these supposed aliens. Because if you didn't realize that, a lot of people believe that President Eisenhower had secret meetings with aliens shortly after the Roswell incident. I know Roswell incident would have been 1948, would have been during Truman, but they say that later on Eisenhower had meetings with those guys. So they may be saying the same thing about the Antichrist. That's the reason he's able to speak to the people of the world. With all the UFO hype today, and with many looking for a reason that their loved ones are missing without feeling guilty, the world is deceived into believing the Antichrist's message. So what comes next? Well, possibly the Psalm 83 war. What's the Psalm 83 war? We've talked about it before. It is a war where Israel's neighbors, the neighboring countries, so we've got potentially Jordan, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and to go along with that, we have the Palestinians, that they attack Israel. It is possible that the Psalm 83 war has already occurred in series with the 1956, 1967, 1973, those wars, the Intifadas, the most recent 2023 Hamas attacks. That may constitute the fullness of the Psalm 83 war. And maybe it doesn't. So if these previous Israeli wars with their neighbors did not constitute the fullness of that, then maybe the next thing that happens in this end time scenario is the Psalm 83 war. So understand that the Mahdi has just made a covenant that people on earth are going to quit all wars so that we won't annihilate themselves. And now one of the first things that happens is all these Palestinians in these various countries rise up and attack Israel again. But the Mahdi, again, all this is speculation based on assumptions made on what the Bible says, right? The Mahdi steps in and stops the attackers, using his position as the leader of all Muslims to broker a long-term peace deal between the Palestinians, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and Israel, okay? So the idea here is this is a long-term peace deal. It is possible that the Palestinians are finally absorbed by the surrounding Islamic nations, leaving Israel with the peace they have been desperate for since 1948 and before. Israel is deceived into thinking that the Mahdi is also the long-awaited Messiah and Savior, as he allows them to rebuild the temple. So he has to, okay, some people say that the Jewish people will not respect a false Messiah who is not Jewish. Some people say the Muslims will not respect a 12th Imam or Mahdi who is Jewish. But I tend to think that this guy who is Muslim, that the Jewish people will be deceived into following him, thinking he is the Messiah. So, this guy, the Antichrist, assures Israel that they will no longer have to defend themselves against the Palestinians and the others, those other close-by nations, because the Mahdi will stop any such attacks as he covenanted with the aliens. But he also, as head of the Islamic religion, now allows them to build on the Temple Mount. Over time, Israel believes the peace and starts taking down the walls that currently protect Israelis from the Palestinian terrorists. All this is leading someplace. All right, we cover a number of things in this chart. First thing, the temple is rebuilt. The Jewish temple in Jerusalem can now be rebuilt as the Antichrist / Mahdi creates a covenant with the aliens that the nations of the earth will remain peaceful. Okay, you may recognize the term from the Bible where they declare peace and safety. All right? So they're going to declare peace and safety, and then something's going to happen. All right? So the temple is now rebuilt during the time period of this covenant with the aliens. Is at least completed enough for sacrificial worship. And this is a speculation, but I'm going to speculate that it is completed within 2 years of the rapture of the church. Why? Because that now leaves 38 years between the start of temple worship and the second coming of Jesus, which looks like it's my next bullet point here. So sacrificial worship is restored after the temple is rebuilt. This now becomes the fig tree. Remember we said that the fig tree being 1948 when Israel came into being, or 1967 when they retook the old city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. That was all assumptions. We're making the assumption that the fig tree, the biblical assumption that the fig tree is man's attempt to cover his own sin by his own doing. That is sacrificial worship in this case. And we're making this assumption, big time assumption, that it is now 38 years between then and the second coming of Jesus. Why do we say 38 years is remember we had that term, this generation shall not pass away? But how long is a generation? I'm making the assumption that the 38 years was that time period. Why am I making that assumption? Because in the book of Luke, chapter 21, when he told them, this generation shall not pass away, he was talking to the people listening to him at that time, and it was 38 years between that day and the day that the temple was destroyed. 38 years. So I'm using that as my basis for saying 38 years between the fig tree and Jesus' coming back. Assumption, but biblically based assumption. All right, what do we have next? Babylon is rebuilt. All right, from this time period, so we have the rapture. Within 2 years of that, the temple is built. Temple worship is restarted. Now, why did I pick 40 to begin with? Because how long were they in the wilderness? They were in the children of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years. But it refers to 38 years of that as being the generation that was in disobedience. So now we have, 33 minus 2 is 31 years between the rebuilding of the temple. Actually, it could be that full 33 years, where the city of Babylon is rebuilt. There's a number of places in the Bible that refer to Babylon being destroyed and never being occupied again. I mean, it sounds like WMD. It sounds like it's wiped out by a nuke, all right? That has not happened in history. Some see this as figurative, others literal. Some people say, well, that's really talking about Roman Catholicism, or it's talking about the city of Rome, or it's talking about, some people say, it's really talking about New York City or Paris or London, or it says that it's talking about Babylon. And it talks, like I say, in several different places about Babylon physically being destroyed. But is as in part of the other studies for these lessons, I discovered that the area around Babylon is blooming these days. Does not look like it did 15 or 20 years ago. So there's plenty of time for Babylon to now be rebuilt. Think of the city of Abu Dhabi. It bloomed out of the desert almost overnight. Within 30 years, it emerged as from two shacks on the beach to one of the world's premier cities, right? So what happens next? Sometime, I think, really close to the beginning of the 7-year tribulation, we have the Gog and Magog war. There's an attack on Israel by a confederacy of nations, including Russia, Iran, Turkey, Sudan, and Libya. Now, some people, and the traditional approach, they're looking for those nations now conforming a confederacy. What I'm saying is, you won't see it. The church will be out of here. Possibly many years before that. All right? The purpose is to take riches from the land of Israel, basically to rob Israel. God will divinely step in to destroy the attacking armies and save Israel. If you want to read about this, it's in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. The Antichrist will again say that it was the aliens who interceded to help keep man from destroying the earth. See, he has this built-in excuse now with the aliens. But this confederacy of nations has violated his supposed covenant with the aliens that, well, we're never going to fight each other again. So what happens then? We now have the confirmation of a covenant by the Antichrist. After peace on earth is violated by the Gog-Magog war, the Antichrist will confirm a covenant with many aliens for a 7-year period, marking the beginning of the tribulation of that 7-year period. All right, so it says in Revelation that he confirms a covenant with, in Daniel, that he confirms a covenant with many for 7 years. Who ever heard of a covenant for 7 years? No, the covenant, you make a covenant until it's broken. But if you make a covenant with these aliens for, let's say, a 7-year trial period in which the earth can prove to the aliens that, well, we're going to be peaceful. We're not going to destroy each other. That makes a lot more sense with the narrative that's in the Bible, at least from my perspective. I'm not saying that's the actual way things are going. I'm saying, think about it. Now then, the confirmation of the covenant marks the start of the 7-year tribulation, as we said. The other thing that we now, in the traditional approach, we couldn't mark the timing down of the judgments very well. We still can't. There's some big question marks, but let's look at this. The judgments that I'm referring to is in the book of Revelation. There's a series of ever-worsening judgments which will be inflicted upon the people that remain on the earth after the rapture of the church. So it's the 7 seal judgments, the 7 trumpet judgments, and the 7 bowl or vial judgments. Let's look first at the seal judgments. The emphasis of these judgments is on man left to his own devices without God's intervention. So it includes things like war. It includes things like famine and such as that. It starts when the Antichrist is revealed shortly after the rapture of the church. Because the first of the seal judgments is the coming of the white horse and the rider on the white horse, who is the Antichrist. So when the Antichrist comes on the scene, the seal judgments have started. So we now have a pretty good estimate of the start of the seal judgments. But when does it end? Does it end at the start of the 70th week? Or that last 7-year period? Or does it end at the mid-tribulation? The midpoint of that 7-year tribulation? Then we have the 7 trumpet judgments, often called a judgment of the thirds, as a third of the vegetation, a third of the waters, a third of the heavens are devastated. One of the questions is, does this begin at the start of Daniel's 70th week, that is the 7-week tribulation, or does it start at the midpoint? Does it end, if it starts at the beginning of the 7 years, does it end at the 3.5-year point, the mid-tribulation, or does it end somewhere close to the end? Then you have the 7 bowl judgments. These are the judgments that finish the work that was started in the trumpet judgments. This is God's last judgment on earth. It is typically believed to start near the end of the tribulation. But is it possible that it might cover the whole last 3.5 years of the tribulation? I don't know. I'm putting this out there for you to give you something to think about. So let's sort of wrap up this speculation. Well, you haven't went to all the other things. The rest of it is very close to what it is with the traditional. I don't have any other, I'm not saying this is insight. I don't have any reason to change any other assumptions at this point. Okay? Once that covenant is confirmed, the rest of the alternate scenario is exactly what the traditional scenario is, with the exception of the timing of the judgments, okay, which we just went into. We're not saying this is how things will happen. The principal takeaway is this. Absolutely nothing has to happen before the rapture of the church. Nothing. Nada. Niet. Nil. Zero. Nothing has to happen. The temple doesn't have to be any closer to being built. Psalm 83 or the Gog-Magog countries don't have to be ready to invade Israel. It could literally happen today. I said at the beginning that I was going to give you one last shot here to take a screen grab of this timeline. So here's your opportunity. Here's the first chart, and I'm going to do the second chart. There's the second chart. You can take a screen grab of that, and then we'll finish up. All right, I know I've been running long. Forgive me for that, please, but I've been having fun with going through this. So here's just a summary of the things we've been going through in this portion of this overview of, or a summary of Bible prophecy. This has been a very, very brief overview of the end times prophecy, that is eschatology, without going into all the supporting scripture. So yeah, we showed a lot today, but there's a lot more there. The idea was to provide the scenarios as a cohesive unit before breaking down into all the individual parts straight from the Bible. We've discussed 3 different scenarios, that is the traditional scenario, the Islamic scenario, and today was the alien scenario, or probably a better name would be the alien Islamic scenario, or Islamic alien scenario, whichever wants credit first. Each involves speculation and assumption. Please understand that. Each appears plausible. The Bible is clear that it did not include all the little details. Why not? I think because it keeps Satan guessing. He doesn't know when things are going to happen. According to the principle revealed in Daniel, the closer to the time of the rapture of the church, the more we will understand. That's part of the reason for going through this whole Mosaic of Bible Prophecy. Because I'm expecting as I go through it, I'm going to be seeing more and more. I've already seen more into it than what I ever have before. All right, so we've went through the introduction, background, and understanding the prophecy. We've talked about key timelines. We've went through this summary of Bible prophecies. Next time, so what now? Why does it matter? And we'll talk about that next time. I hope that you join us for that episode, that lesson. And regardless, we hope to see you next time here on Passing the Torch. So long.